Sane Occultism by Dion Fortune. Narrated by Matthew Schmitz. 4. Credulity in Occult Research. Occult science has two enemies to contend with: the skeptical materialist who denies everything and the credulous occultister who believes everything. Serious students need to find the middle way between these two extremes. They must, on the one hand, avoid credulity, and on the other, recognize that the nature of proof available concerning the inner planes differs from that available for natural science. Spiritualism, working up from the material plane through the denser strata of the unseen, has been able to make use of a technique which satisfies even the laboratory-trained orthodox scientist. But the occultist, working in less tangible spheres, cannot avail himself of instruments of precision, and appears to have given up as hopeless any attempt at proof, satisfied if he attains to personal certainty. This is an unsatisfactory state of affairs, and opens wide the door to charlatanism and delusion, and we need to be quite sure that it is inevitable before we acquiesce. It is my contention that we need not rest satisfied with so insecure a position, for there are ways of testing the findings of clairvoyant investigation that will enable us to assess their value without spoiling the experiment. There are many different kinds of occult experiments, and I do not here propose to consider all that ground which has been adequately explored by the workers in psychic research, nor yet the poltergeist type of phenomena wherein the evidence of non-psychic witnesses has to be investigated, for both these are amenable to the ordinary laws of proof, but rather to consider the type of psychic research by clairvoyant vision with which the work of Rudolf Steiner and C.W. Ledbetter has made us familiar. It is very necessary that we should have some criterion for judging this type of work, for hosts of psychics have sprung up who lay claim to psychic vision and declare that they see people's auras, read their past incarnations, or can conduct investigations of the Akashic records on the astral plane, and offer no proof beyond their word. There is, let us admit it, substantial evidence that all these things can be done, but there is not always substantial evidence that a particular psychic is doing them. But we need to remember that because we discount the findings of a particular psychic, we are not disproving psychism, nor are we even discrediting that psychic, for no one knows better the extreme delicacy of their gift and its liability to distortion than those who themselves have vision. In dealing with occult experiments, we need to adopt two attitudes and to keep them distinct. At the time of the experiment, we must have absolute faith, and after the experiment is over, we must be impartially critical towards its results. Faith is necessary at the time of the experiment because suspicion or skepticism gives unconscious suggestion to the medium or experimenter, and as those engaged in using these supernormal faculties are always in a very sensitive condition, a skeptical attitude on the part of an experimenter may effectually prevent the carrying out of an experiment by upsetting the psychic, making him lose his self-confidence and doubt himself, whereupon his faculties automatically close down. He fumbles tentatively on the borderland of his own subconscious mind and fails to pass out into the higher consciousness. Those who take part in any occult investigation should make up their minds to accept the theories on which it is based as working hypotheses and to give themselves up wholeheartedly to the experiment while it is in progress. In this way, the group mind of the circle gives subconscious suggestion to the psychic and helps him to rise to a higher plane. Once he is safely established there, his confident and awakened consciousness tends to pull his circle up after him. They too become at least partially aware of the presence of the unseen, and their roused emotion and confidence lift their psychic up yet higher, and he becomes able to give them something worth having. None of the higher types of psychic faculty can be exercised unless the circle has also raised its consciousness a plane. This attitude, however, should be reserved solely for the occasion of the experiment. As soon as it is completed, the experimenter should become a scientist again and examine his results in the cold light of science. His judicial attitude, however, should not be that of the English law, which has only two verdicts, guilty or not guilty, but rather of the Scottish law, which has a third possible verdict of not proven, and a very great deal of psychic matter should be referred to this latter class to await further evidence before it is accepted. At the same time, he ought not to allow himself to be discouraged by difficulty of proof, but bend his whole energies and ingenuity to devising fresh tests and experiments whereby his elusive subject matter may be nailed to the board of proof. He must remember, however, that there are in occultism two kinds of evidence and proof, which I will distinguish as objective proof and subjective proof. The laws of objective proof we know well enough. They concern the findings of the physical senses, counterchecked by logic and experiment, but we must not forget that there is also the evidence of things not seen, or subjective proof, which depends upon intuition. Now, intuition, like instinct, is a portmanteau word of many meanings, but the thing it represents is an actual thing, and, in some degree or other, within the experience of most people. The Oxford Dictionary defines it as immediate apprehension by the mind without reasoning, immediate insight, and, so far as I know, orthodox psychology has not dealt with it otherwise than by trying to disprove its existence. But in this, as in a good many other points in which psychology has tried issue with popular belief, the latter has justified itself, and in our new knowledge of the nature of the subconscious mind, we find the clue into intuition. I propose to define intuition as subconscious mentation, wherein the logical processes are carried on below the threshold of consciousness and take cognizance of data which may never have been present to consciousness. In this form of thinking, it is only the finished process of which we become aware, the stages by which we arrive at it being hidden. Therefore, it is that intuition is referred to as being immediate and without reasoning. When, in addition to our knowledge of the nature of subconsciousness, we realize the existence of subtler senses than those five with which we are familiar, we must realize that the subconscious mind may have data to work upon of which the conscious mind knows nothing, and that its findings are not to be ignored. But on the other hand, remembering that the subconscious mind has also dissociated complexes, we realize that its findings are not to be accepted blindly. Let us, therefore, in occult research, accept the two kinds of data, the one derived from observation and the other from intuition. Let us admit that the latter, when properly counter-checked, can be just as reliable as the former, which of course also require counter-checking, as is admitted by all but the very naive. But do not let us make the mistake of confusing one kind of evidence with the other. It is a common thing in occult circles to hear people talk as if subjective evidence were entirely on par with objective evidence, to make statements concerning Atlantis, or past incarnations, or the Masters, as if they were in possession of definite objective proof, and when the inquirer asks for evidence, the devotee gets angry and his interlocutor disgusted. I well remember that my entry into occult science was delayed for many years by this method of procedure. I had phenomena presented for my edification which would not stand up for 5 minutes under the most cursory investigation, and I, judging by the bulk of the sample, condemned the whole system. I now know that I was dealing with subjective evidence, and that it is valid in its sphere, and can be proved by the appropriate methods. But when subjective evidence is submitted to the tests appropriate for objective evidence, as it always will be if offered as objective evidence, it promptly falls down, and the whole system and the person advocating it are discredited. Let us now consider further the nature of subjective evidence. It depends upon three types of perception: intuition, as previously defined, of which the results but not the process are perceptible to consciousness; conscious psychism, which I propose to define as perception by the subtler senses in full consciousness, not at the present moment going into the definition of the subdivisions into which it can be divided; and subconscious psychism, wherein the perceptions of the partially developed higher sense organs are too faint to touch consciousness and therein become part of the data of intuition. The purely subjective data of intuition can be detected by means of psychoanalysis, and the vision of a seer can be subjected to the same process as a dream in the hands of a Freudian, that is to say, analysis by means of free association, with the technique of which the literature of psychotherapeutics is concerned, and which would be too lengthy to deal with here in detail. It must suffice to say that the subject is instructed to take each item of his dream or vision in turn, to dwell upon it, and to let his mind wander free from that starting point, while the psychoanalyst notes where it wanders. If the subject is honest in his endeavors, it will be found that the trains of free association derived from the different dream symbols are converging upon the same point, which is one of emotional importance to the subject, or else are coming to a dead stop at the same point, which shows that the object of emotion is dissociated. This process enables the dream symbols to be reduced to dream material and throws an immense amount of light on the workings of the hidden side of the mind. In ordinary subjective dreams, the dream material is found to consist of repressed desires, memories of incidents occurring during the past day of which the emotion still reverberates, and impressions impinging on the 5 physical senses during sleep. There are, however, other types of dreams, which I will denominate as lucid dreams, and they are stimulated by impressions impinging on the subtler senses during sleep. The visions of the psychic are also due to the same mechanism operating with sufficient force to penetrate into waking consciousness. If such dreams and visions be submitted to psychoanalysis, it will be found that they usually contain a certain subconscious element in addition to their content derived from superconsciousness, and it is the task of the analyst to distinguish between the two. It will be found that those elements which are derived from the subjective realm of the subconscious mind will, when used as the starting point of a free association chain of ideas, lead thought straight back whence they issued, into the subconscious, familiar to the Freudian analyst. But the elements that are derived from superconsciousness will, when subjected to the process of analysis by free association, lead thought also to the place whence they issued, in this case the superconsciousness, and will most effectually elucidate the meaning of the vision. They will also bring through into consciousness an immense mass of material which has previously been apprehended superconsciously, but has not succeeded in passing the gulf that separates the higher self from brain consciousness. We find that, just as the dream symbolism could be reduced to dream material by this process of analysis by free association, so the vision symbolism can be reduced to vision material by the same means. But in the one case, the trail of free association leads into the subconscious, and in the other, into the superconsciousness. A further test, however, may appropriately be applied to the superconscious material, thus rendered available. If words indicative of the principal symbols in the vision and ideas in the vision material be used in a word redaction test with a stopwatch, according to the method of Jung, and the reaction words submitted to a further analysis by free association, the resulting proof will not only be beyond cavil, but will open up still further the riches of the higher mind. The use of the foregoing method will yield most interesting results, for although it will clearly demonstrate the subconscious element which is present in all psychism to a greater or less degree, it will also open up communications with the contents of superconsciousness and bring them through into brain consciousness. The use of free association for this purpose is a most important aspect of esoteric work, but its technique is too complicated to be discussed in detail in the present pages. A serious responsibility rests upon all who undertake the publication of the results obtained in occult experiments. They should make sure beyond all possibility of doubt that they have recorded and interpreted their visions correctly, both in concept and in detail, and should avoid in any way demanding of their readers a faith which renders ridiculous both those who ask and those who give, lest they bring into disrepute the sacred science which is for the healing of the nations.